Why literature search in the topic of bias in this lecture? Why literature search in general? So, I think it's super relevant to be aware of primary sources. I think it's the daily bread and butter to be able to learn, to be able to interpret, to be able to understand primary publications. That is research that has been done by researchers. Now, let me explain why I think this is so relevant. Well, first of all, if you get your information from somebody else, and that can be a really good person, that can be someone who's highly prized, really valuable in opening up science for people in school, for people who want to learn about science. So take Khan Academy. I really greatly value their educational effort, but automatically such an educational effort comes with normative choices. You make choices when you are a researcher, and research is not static. Research is developing. And if you're not part of that development, then you are prone to infer bias in your educational efforts. This is why, for me, it's a specific privilege to be a researcher and a teacher. And those two things, they go hand in hand for me. I cannot separate one from the other. They are interconnected. Just as you, as a learning people, are interconnected with me as also a learning person in teaching. And that is so important for me personally, that people have primary experience in research. That they do their own research. They are active researchers, and they are really educated as scientists. So, another reason, beside the normativity, why I think this is relevant, is because of the precision of language. Now, people that are in the communication of science, they will specify their language with the goal of reaching a wide audience. And I think that is an admirable goal. It's an educational goal. It's very important that more people learn about science, learn to be critical about science, but also learn about the results, the benefits, and all that. We see that in the current debates that we have a lot. But if people don't do primary research, if they are not conducting their own research, what that means is basically they never made certain choices when it came to the wording. And the wording in research is something very important. This is why philosophy is so close to my heart, because philosophy is very precise when it comes to its wording. And scientific communicators will choose a wording that is most understandable for people. Most understandable, often most simple, and also which has a high marketing value. And with that comes a lack in precision, I think. This is something that is very important, because as a researcher, you sometimes use wording that is not instantly understandable, that can be complicated, but that was a choice. It was a choice in the research process to use that wording for the goal of precision. And that is why I think primary research is so important. And you take that precision away when you have someone who tries to market research to you. So do not misunderstand me. If people do that, I still think it's a good thing. But as a scientist, someone with a bachelor in science, with a master in science, someone who has a scientific education, you need to be able, I think, to understand science. I consider this a primary goal of any researcher. Well, of course, the most important one in the mid-run will be conducting your own research, contributing to this whole kind of like understanding. Small piece of the puzzle, maybe. But contributing, nevertheless, is, I think, very important. But in order to do that, you need to be aware of the scientific canon. You need to be aware of what's in the air. You need to understand how you can really know what a scientific community is currently working on, so you can identify your own niche, your own contribution, how you're going to help to push that forward. And this is why we need to rely on scientific primary sources. And in order to do that, I compiled a few examples of videos where I would say this is helpful. That is something that I can encourage to use. Scholar Google is one of the most powerful search engines we have in academia. It's quite fascinating how you can find lots of things there by doing the right combinations of keywords. So let's familiarize ourselves a little bit with the algorithm that is behind it, and let's see what we can find with that. So one powerful thing that I like very much about Scholar Google is that it allows you to find researchers. So you can look for specific people. So taking one example from our faculty, I could look at my colleague Stefan Schaltegger, and then I see a profile where his research is to be found. And that is a really powerful tool, because most people today in science are registered, and it gives you some initial information, for instance, how much their work is cited, how many papers are cited, how often. So the H-index is an important measure in science. It's imperfect, it has many limitations, but still it has a certain kind of like strong point in saying how relevant other people perceive the research of the specific person. So, and then you can see how many citations there are over time, which are a lot in this case. You can see that this is a clearly outstanding profile. And then it starts with the most highly cited paper. So you can see how this paper from 2002, very influential, but also one paper, which actually then is a book, is an updated version, and that also received many citations. You can also look at the whole thing by year, and then you see how productive the colleague is, very productive, how many papers he produced in the last years, and you can also look further back, and then you see, of course, this is a long-standing, fully established career where still much will be produced in the future, I assume, but we look back at a really long publication history, which is quite impressive, but it's also fast. We can see in 1989, here are the first papers, and some you see in 1990 already highly cited, and you see ökologische Rationalität, so it was in German back then, but you can see how radical this research has been and still is. So, and that is something that is really helpful. One thing that you can't see here is how he's connected to other people, but that is often the case. So take another example, a dear colleague again, Dave Epson. So now is he, is David Epson, doesn't like the name David. Dave is the right name. So, and then you can see again the citations, the H-index, and so on. You can see the paper in Science that received many citations, but also a paper that we had together that is cited by a lot of people. And you can also, when you look at the year, you can still see like lots of publications in recent years. But what's interesting is here you can also then see other researchers in this profile. So first of all, me, Dave is one of my most dearest and most important co-authors, so we work together a lot, but you can also see other people, and you can go, for instance, to the page of my good friend Jan Hansbach. You can see what he recently published, and you can often click on these papers, and then you see there's a PDF available. And that is often the case, that in Scholar Google you can find these PDFs, and that is a really powerful thing that allows us to find a lot about the respective colleagues, and is a really, really nice way to see how this is connected. So you can see then, for instance, Tibi, our friend from Romania. You could go to Stefan Klotz, a colleague from the UFZ Z Helmholtz, and there you can see, okay, how much did he publish lately, and obviously there's some sort of a discontinuation, so that sometimes happens that this is not up to date, or maybe the profile switched. So you have to be a little bit careful, but in most cases, take Tobias Kümmerle, you see highly respected, highly influential researcher and good colleague from Berlin, and then you can see, okay, like this guy is a rocket, he's publishing a lot and his work is highly cited, and then you can see, okay, like what are papers that interest me, and you can go through that. So that is one very powerful thing that Scholar Google allows. You can look at the different researchers, but another thing is it allows you, for instance, also to look at specific topics. So take one that is very important for us at the faculty. So take transdisciplinarity, and then we take sustainability. So transdisciplinarity and sustainability. And let's look at that. So transdisciplinarity, sustainability. And then you can see which are the highly cited papers, which papers are quite relevant to this end. And you can go through that and you can see, okay, which papers have recently come out, and the algorithm always takes some sort of a measure on like which papers were cited how often, and which papers are actually then rather recently. So it tries to make some sort of a trade-off between these two things. And we can also maybe try transdisciplinary. So look at that. And then we, for instance, when we look at transdisciplinary research in sustainability, and then we see one of the most highly cited papers, and you can even check out the papers that cited it. So you can even like go, okay, which paper cited this paper, and then you see it's from our dear colleague Daniel Lang. And again, the nice thing is now I can look at Daniel's profile, or I can look at our good friend and colleague Arnim Wieck, also a very impressive track, very high impact research, as you can see. And you can see all other papers. There's one paper from us, there are other papers that are cited, and then I can look like, who's that person? You know, and I can check Paul Stock from the University of Kansas, and I can look at his profile. So, and that is a very fascinating combination, how you can go through that and you can look at different colleagues, you meet old friends if you're a little bit familiar with the literature, and you can see what did they do recently, and you can look at the papers and then you can see, that sounds very interesting, that is a very specific systematic assessment, I want to look at that. And this is where Scholar Google is so helpful. You can look around and you can really like go through a community and can see, okay, who's working on what and how are these things connected. So that's why I like Scholar Google so much. It's a really powerful search engine. To look for scientific literature is Scopus. But there are many like scientific databases. There's the Thomson Reuters Web of Science. There's chemical abstracts, there's PubMed, but I think Scopus for me just works best. Maybe it's because I'm familiar with it, also because we have institutional access at Leuphana University. And the nice thing is you can instantly start searching. So I can, for instance, look for sustainability science. That's a little bit generic. Okay, I give you that. But I can like start searching and I see, okay, it's a lot. But let's familiarize ourselves a little bit with what we are looking at. So you can look at the authors. You see Arnim Wieck, one of our guest professors here at the Leuphana University, is one of the first. Jingle Wu from Arizona State University. So you have all sorts of people. Of course, Roland Scholz, Daniel Lang, obviously. So there you already see, okay, these are people that published. You see a lot coming here from different subject areas. Environmental science, social science, agriculture, and so on. So you get that type of thing. You get document types, which is mainly article, book, chapters, reviews, these types of categories. Where what is also interesting is source title, where are things published. So in sustainability, environment, development, and sustainability, Journal of Business Ethics, so and sustainability science. So there you can see, okay, which journals basically publish stuff to this end. And this is how you just look around. But what we did now, even you look at the search, you see title, abstract, keywords, and you see sustainability and science. Okay. So what we need to do is, when we look for such a combined word, we need to look for these things together. So sustainability, science, and then let's see what that does. Yeah, and that is already quite fewer, right? Who wrote really sustainability science. Familiar names, though. It's pretty much comparable, but these are the people then who published about sustainability science, and you can see also again the different journals. So sustainability science, sustainability, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Ecology and Society, Gaia, Journal of Cleaner Production. So that I like, how you can very quickly look at different people. You can see how this increased over time, so how many articles were published in which year. And now I could just scroll around and I could like check, okay, who's publishing where, and then I would see Arnim Wiek, okay, friend of mine from Arizona State. I can click on his name, and then I see, look at that, he published quite some articles, so I can see his citations are increasing on a really high level. I see all this descriptive information, I see in which subject areas he published, I see his affiliation and so on. So, and that's already super fascinating, you know, how you can basically like look at all these things and see what one person did. But what is super nice about Scopus is that you also can look at an overview about an institution. So I look at Arizona State, and then you see Arizona State, of course, very large, very prestigious university, has a huge publication output, right? 20,000 authors, 95,000 documents. You know, whole institution, even more, so that's quite a lot. So, and I can look at an overview of the different departments here, even. You know, and if I now go back, you know, I say, okay, I got like Arnim Wiek here, and now I want to see, okay, who did he publish with? And then you see Daniel Lang. I can click on Daniel, and then you see the papers he published, how his citations are dramatically increasing, how much he published in the respective years. And again, you see the institutional access, and then you can start playing around with things, you know. Then you can see, okay, this is the affiliation, this is how many authors we have, this is how many things were published there. You see from social science, from environmental science, business, and so on. So you see the different arenas that publish here. And when you now go, for instance, the documents, you know, then you could say, okay, so let's home in here. Let's say look at the last 5 years. So I just take the last 5 years and I limit my view to that. And then you can say, okay, what happened in the last 5 years at Leuphana University? And then again, you get an overview and you see a lot happened. 2,000 articles happened. And then you can see, okay, who were the different people that published here. So, and when you now would say, okay, but I want to look at full articles and maybe reviews, because conference papers are like in a slightly different category in many arenas. In some they are very important, in others, let's say in the focus I want to take now, not so much. And then you see, okay, these are now the different people and how they published here. So these are the most kind of like abundantly publishing people at Leuphana University. These are the subject areas. And then you can see again, like Journal of Cleaner Production, Sustainability, Gaia, Science of the Total Environment, Sustainability Science. So these are the journals where most people, most publications happened. And then you can even see, okay, who was the funding sponsor. So DFG, German Research Council, funded quite some stuff, and so on. So, and that's super fascinating to get a quick glance, you know. And then you can again continue, you know, and I could now look at our colleague Klaus Kümmerer, and I could click on Klaus Kümmerer, and then I would get an overview again about his publication track, which is again super impressive. See, really high number of publications, high number of citations, but also I can check out his latest articles, you know. Or I could say, okay, let's change that view. What's his like most highly cited? And then you see, okay, antibiotics in the aquatic environment, a review, part 1, highly cited in Chemosphere, right? A highly influential article, and I can look at that article, I can click on it, and then I see more. I see the abstract already, and I can like look a little bit around, right? And that's for me the fascinating thing about Scopus, that we can combine all these things together. So what you've learned now is there's all sorts of databases where you can look for scientific literature. But I think what's important in the early career of a researcher, and that includes a student that is aiming at a degree in a Bachelor of Science, I think you should keep track of the current literature. And I think it's really important that you go to the homepage of journals which you consider to be important or which you have had repeatedly or heard about or read about in the respective modules that you have, and that you try to read what regularly comes out of these journals. So the most prestigious and most important journals in science are actually, well, Nature and Science. They are not always associated with sustainability science, but I think it's still important to regularly read what is coming out in general in the research landscape. And they often have abstracts so that at least you get institutional access, that you know, okay, there is the title, there's the abstract, you can read basically what it's about. But there are other journals that I would consider to be important that you need to read regularly. If you're interested in a topic, you need to know what is happening. And what I would recommend, if you are working or if you want to focus on sustainability science, what you should do is you should basically look at the journal Sustainability Science. You should probably look at the journal Ecological Economics, and I would also recommend the Journal of Cleaner Production. So these are three journals that I hold in high esteem. And it would be good to go to the homepage of the journal and check out regularly which new articles came out. You can also often get e-alerts where you put in your email address at the respective journal and then you see which new articles came out. Another possibility that I think is also pretty good is their software such as Feedly. There's like all sorts of apps that you can use to get new articles. My recommendation is to start small. You know, you should have maybe e-alerts or like regular updates on these new articles from few journals. Do not overburden yourself with 10 or 20 journals. Try to build an atomic habit where you maybe look at 2 or 3 journals, but try to look at the title, try to look at the abstract, not so much only for understanding the respective articles and to look deeply into specific ones. That is, I think, secondary. What is important to get a flavor, kind of like what is currently happening. What are people working about? What seems to be important in these respective journals? So try to go online, find a journal that you consider and that you hold like in high esteem, and get an e-alert. I will show you for one journal how that works. On Sustainability Science, you see the editorial board here, so you see who's basically responsible for the journals. So you have all the different people who are reading the articles, examining them, and who check basically the quality and try to deal with all the submissions that the journal gets. So this is a very long list of people that you see that contribute to the respective journal. And I feel that's very, very important to realize that you're standing on the shoulders of giants when you read such a journal, that there's a lot of articles, a lot of people that we are familiar with that are from the sustainability science bubble, let's call it. And that's, I think, important to realize, okay, these are the people that are involved there. There is the aims and scope, so you can look at that, how they define themselves and so on. But what is important for you now is not the submit manuscript, that hopefully comes later. Now, what is important is here you can explore the online first articles, volumes and issues, collections, but you can also sign up for e-alerts. So you can get an e-alert and you can get the latest articles in your inbox from the respective journal. So that is something for the journal which I think is very helpful. And you can also look at the latest articles here. You know, you can even, for some articles like this one from Chris Boone, Preparing Interdisciplinary Leadership for Sustainable Future, and you can click on the respective article
and you can read it. So, and of course, I can highly recommend this article because it comes from Chris Boone, a colleague that I hold in high esteem from Arizona State. And there you can check out the latest articles. If the PDF isn't there, then it's at least that you can read the abstract and you can look a little bit around. And I think you should always be on top of like what's currently happening, what is being published. I feel this is something that everybody should do regularly. Best get stuff like this on your phone, so that when you're maybe drinking a tea or a coffee, when you're taking a break, just skimming a little bit through the arena and seeing what is currently happening. I feel this is very, very important.